Oakland, California has announced a small $500 a month guaranteed income or universal basic income scheme. It's one that excludes white people. I'll leave a link to the report about it below. It's for people below a poverty threshold, and white people are excluded. It's for black, indigenous and people of colour communities. And the reason for that, ostensibly, is that white people earn more on average than people of colour, black people and people of colour. In which case, why have a poverty threshold? If all white people are way above the poverty threshold, you don't need to exclude white people. The poverty threshold will exclude them. It is a circular argument. It is nonsense. Openly racist. It would be completely illegal if it was the other way around, if it was only white people who benefit from it. In those circumstances, it wouldn't just get closed down, people would get sued and prosecuted. The excuse that's being used here is that this is a private endeavour. It's being funded by private individuals and philanthropists to the tune of $6.75 million. That's how much is in the kitty, and private people can do what they can, give money to whoever they want, apparently. That's not true. It doesn't make any difference. Now, this is about three growth areas that I want to go through. The first is black reparations. That's a growth area. The second is universal basic income. That's going to be a growth area. And the third is money printing and the credit boom. Now, firstly, dealing with black reparations. That is basically about paying money to black people. Black people have had it tough. Black people earn less than white people. Must be white people's fault. Therefore, white people, via the government, have to pay money to black people. That's basically how society owes black people money. That's the way it goes, and that's what's put forward by people like Kamala Harris and other left-wing Democrats. And I think Joe Biden may have sort of hinted that he kind of agrees with it. You're seeing hints of this coming up. There was a recent program in Evanston, Illinois, is there to compensate black people for housing discrimination that happened between 1919 and 1969. So 50 years to a century ago, and it is only open. Although the people discriminated against were black people, it is not only black people who might conceivably have suffered by that, but this compensation is only open to black people. If you're white, you cannot claim compensation under this fund. And that seems to me to be, that is adding a racist element to this fund, to this policy, that measure in Evanston, Illinois. Now, and I think we're seeing this in this Oakland case that I'm discussing here. The second growth area is universal basic income. That is fashionable. We're going to hear a lot more about that. It sounds nice. Everyone gets the money paid into their bank account, a living wage paid into their bank account before they've scratched themselves in the morning, just by virtue of drawing breath. Now, there is one previous example. There was a small example of this that happened recently in Stockton, in California. These cases occur in California, which seems to be going a bit nuts. I think California, there's a big exodus of people trying to get out of California because its financial policies are crazy. But this Stockton, California case was a case of universal basic income being paid to 125 individuals. This one wasn't based on race. These people were randomly selected. I think they were selected. They had to be below the poverty threshold, but otherwise they were randomly selected. And there has been a lot of hand waving about how successful it was in the most generalized, foggy terms. I'll quote from I'll leave a link to the article about it. The quotes that were made about the people who ran it and inevitably proclaimed it a success. We are seeing immeasurable gains in terms of how someone feels about themselves that we can't measure quantitatively. So we're seeing immeasurable gains that we can't measure. Okay, that means the person running it thinks, well, this is pretty good, and people feel good about themselves. It's nice. Well, I'd probably feel quite good about myself if someone gave me a few $100 every month. Now, another quote, poor people here are making incredibly rational, smart decisions about their spending. And one example of this is a lady who was especially heartened that her eldest daughter can now indulge in longer showers. So you remember when you went to have a bath when you were a boy, you went to have a shower, and your mum said, hey, don't use up all the hot water. Well, apparently that has made you miserable for life. And so this is one of the signs of success. Another one was about a lady who said she wants to take her children to Disneyland. I don't want to go and have to, for lack of a better word, penny pinch on the vacation, souvenirs, t-shirts. I want to do the whole thing right. So Disneyland tat is the key to contentment and happiness and quality of life. Now, none of this means there's anything successful about that small Stockton, California scheme that is now being pronounced a success. But what it does mean is that journalists and activists and politicians, they are determined to pronounce it a success. And you can guarantee this Oakland case, which is bigger, I'd say about 10 times the size, 10 times as big. This Oakland case, that is going to be a success as well. I think particularly the bit about it being only for black people. You'll get quotes about how black people feel suddenly cared for. They feel there's some justice in the world now. There'll be some guff about that. Now, in Oakland, as I said, the kitty is $6.75 million. Now, $6.75 million buys $500 a month for 1,125 households. Now that's out of a total of 162,419 households in Oakland. So less than 1%, between 0.5% and 1% of people in Oakland. You can reduce that, of households in Oakland. You can reduce that number by the number who are under the poverty threshold, but it's still a tiny study. So you have to be black, below the poverty threshold, and your name gets pulled out of a hat. Whatever happens, it will get proclaimed a success, and the call will be for state governments and national governments to take it up, start borrowing money and giving it away, because it will make people richer, it will make them get more jobs and better jobs and have better quality of life in ways that you can't measure. Okay, the third thing that this is a part of, and I think this is really the big thing, and that is the big unseen thing here, and that is money printing and the credit boom. We are in a credit boom at the moment, and it is accelerating. And a credit boom is when money gets pumped into the economy for lending purposes. The central bank of a country, particularly the Federal Reserve in America, it prints up money. It doesn't just go and spend it into the economy, it lends it into the economy. So it lends it to government by buying a bond from a bank, which that bank has just a few days ago bought from government. Or it lends the money into the general economy by buying things like mortgages from banks or corporate bonds that people have, money that people have lent to companies. It then buys those bonds. But primarily it's government bonds and mortgages. So it's lending money into the economy. The idea is to get more money into the economy than to create more lending, which creates supposedly more economic activity. Lending money against future speculative rising asset prices, against fixed items that can act as security. This is not a credit for transactions that have already occurred. It's lending money against future transactions or future speculative gains. And rich people like this because it creates an asset boom, but it disguises the fact that it is enriching rich people. What you get is the central government, the central bank. It prints up that money and it puts it into the economy, and that money doesn't go into the productive part of the economy. It is going into asset prices. It is eventually finding its way into share prices, into house prices, things that can act as security, creating a boom there. And that's why, and that enriches the rich, because it is the rich who own assets. And that's why during the coronavirus pandemic, we should have seen, we did see a recession, a massive recession, a massive increase in unemployment, a decline in day-to-day economic activity. But we have seen a massive a really huge all-time high in the share price and in property prices. That is totally illogical, totally irrational. That has happened because governments have spent money into the economy, stimulus checks, stimmy checks, people then get them, and they invest them in shares, they invest them in property prices. And that means those assets rise in value, rich people get richer. It works in another way as well. It's not just the money that gets printed and lent into the economy that finds its way into those assets. What happens? Well, that does happen, which increases the value of assets. Then ordinary people who say you might have a few $1,000s and you say to yourself, I'm going to use that money in order to train myself so I can get promoted at work, or so that I can offer an extra service, so that I become more valuable. I have more to offer. I can earn more money by increasing my own value. What you will then do, if you see those asset prices rising because of money printing, you'll say, I'm not going to invest that nest egg in myself. I'm not going to be that. I'd be a fool to do that. I'm not going to be a mug. I'm going to gamble that money. I'm going to invest it in those rising asset prices, things like Bitcoin, house prices, share prices, and that will make me richer, faster, with less effort. So exponentially more money goes into the economy, which exponentially increases the price. Exponentially more money goes into those assets, which increases their values and their prices, which exponentially increases the wealth of the rich, i.e. the owners of assets. So it is a way, and that increases inequality. We're seeing rapidly increasing inequality at the moment, particularly as a result of all that money printing. That is what money printing does. The rich like it, and it is this universal basic income, getting government to print money or to borrow money and to spend it on universal basic income. That is a way to enrich the rich while making it look as though it is the rich paying the poor. It is not. That money will end up in the pockets, in the assets of the wealthy, making them wealthier. Now, this always follows the same pattern. At the beginning, it feels really good because right at the start, a little bit of money goes into the economy. It really increases economic activity. If you can remember the Blair years, 97, 98, perhaps a little bit of the Thatcher boom, but primarily I would say the best example of this is the late 90s, the Blair years, where they were printing money and lending it into the economy, and a little bit of government lending into the economy created a big boom. And everything felt good. You suddenly feel you've discovered the Keynesian key to fairness and plenty for all. But it's in fact like taking a drug. What you find is the next time you print money and lend it, the government prints money and lends it into the economy, it doesn't have quite as much effect. You need more next time, and the next time, and the next time. You keep needing to take more in order to get the same effect. And that's for two reasons. Firstly, if the central bank has lent money into the economy, if that money hasn't been used to completely pay off the loan and the interest, what the person who's borrowed that money is then left with is a debt overhang. That's like a hangover for the drug addict. Then when you're lending more money into the economy, you have to lend some money into the economy to overcome the effect of the previous hangover, that debt overhang, and then more again, twice as much, in order to get the same effect that you had before. And similarly, what you find is each time you do that, each time you print money and lend it into the economy, at first that money gets put into really profitable ventures, and then gradually the things it gets put into are less and less profitable. So you find you just have to keep putting more and more in, the same as a drug addict, having to take more and more to get the same effect. But it's a drug that you can't get off. It's a drug that the economy can't get off. If governments now, if the Federal Reserve in America said, we're not going to print up any more money, we're not going to buy any more government bonds, we're not going to buy any more mortgages, we're not going to do any more intervention. If the central government said, we're not going to put out any more stimulus checks, no more infrastructure projects, no more loans to municipal bodies, then what you would see is a collapse in stock market prices, a collapse in housing prices. You would see banks falling over. The economy would seize up. The economy would collapse. And this has the same pattern. You get that boom. Then when that boom wears off, you get intervention in order to prop up asset prices. We saw that in 2008. Then you get direct spending into the economy, which we've seen during the coronavirus crisis. Then after that, you get increasing state control and repression, including financial repression. Now, historically, this frequently, well, not all the time, but frequently ends in war, because you need to find a reason that people can't oppose for spending just really unthinkable sums into the economy, because people start to question, people start to say, this is mad, we're just printing all this money and stuffing it into the economy, it's got to stop somewhere. So you need an excuse to be able to say anyone who opposes this is a traitor, and war is a good way to do this. This happened in ancient Greece. There was a credit boom before the Peloponnesian Wars. In 18th century France, there were a series of credit booms before the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. 25 years of really nasty conflict. And it happened before in Germany, before you got this credit boom before World War One, and again before World War Two. And I am not predicting war in this case. What I am predicting is some reason for massive spending that it's felt no one can criticise, and racial justice might just be the reason for that. Now, the one commentator said that this Oakland case for I think 1,125 households receiving this money, this Oakland case, it can't scale up to the whole economy because it would require too much money printing and spending into the economy. My reply to that is that may be the whole point, that it precisely because it provides universal basic income will provide an excuse to print and spend unthinkable sums into the economy. So my advice is, as this credit boom continues and rises on an exponential curve, get ready for more racial justice Joe Biden style, and get ready to get it good and hard.